Good evening. Tonight, I am going to talk about the 5 interview questions that I ask in every interview to a data engineer and especially senior engineers. If you can't answer these 5 questions, you don't need to be showing up for the interview. So, these questions, when they can't be answered, these are one of my pet peeves if you cannot answer these. So, if you have any questions as I go through these, if you have any thoughts about questions you've received in the interviews, I would love to hear that down in the feedback, down in the comments. Let me know your experiences. But these are the 5 questions that I ask in every interview that I do. So, number 1, what is your approach to data modeling? And I'm going to give you a big hint here. It is not your ETL process. I get so many people come through your interview process when I ask, tell me about how you go about data modeling or what's your approach to data modeling. And they start explaining to me how they pull data from a source and put it into data lake. And that's not the answer. I'm looking for something along the lines of talking about dimensional modeling, looking for talking about star schemas, talking about how you break things up or how you normalize the data. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for your ETL process in and of itself. Nikhil, it's been a while. Hi, how you doing? So again, as I go through these, if you have questions, thoughts, and your experience, share them down in the comments. Say hello. Let me know you're here and where you're coming from. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is tell me about the difference between a dimension and a fact. Now, if you can't tell me a little bit about dimensions and facts, if you look at me like I have 5 heads when I ask that question, then again, you're probably not ready to be definitely not ready to be a senior data engineer, definitely not ready to be a mid-level engineer either. So explaining what a dimension and a fact is. So let's jump back to the modeling question, and we've got a answer here from Eric Cartman. Eric is part of our Discord community. Super excited to have you here tonight. Thanks for joining. So first step is to understand the business requirements and potential data that answers the questions. Absolutely. Anytime that you jump into a project, you need to make sure that my recommendation is to ask 5 whys, right? You're going to ask why 5 times at a minimum to any project that you're getting ready to start. What is the business result, right? What is the business requirements, obviously, but also why are we doing this project? What business question is it answering? What are we solving by pulling this data? How is it going to help us to either increase our bottom line or decrease our operation cost? So asking those questions are so important. And so often we get requirements that maybe aren't as flushed out as we would like. So Eric, definitely great first step here is understanding business requirements. Nikhil, understanding ML ops now. Okay, good job. That's awesome, man. Okay, so that was data modeling. I talked a little bit about your approach. What's your approach to data modeling? First question. Second question is, what is the difference between dimension and fact? And what are slowly changing dimensions? So that's kind of a multi-question there, right? So let's start with what's the difference between a dimension and fact? So we've got a handful of people out there. If you have a good answer to how you would answer this question, I'd love to know down in the comments. Let me know how you would answer what is a dimension, what is a fact. Let's start with that. And let me know down in the comments, and I'll come back around to those after I get through these questions, and we'll talk about how to answer them in a way that not only is going to get you into a data engineer position, but get you into a place where you might even be able to jump straight into a mid-level, or I've had people jump into senior level positions from like a TPM. So great experience. Hey, Ed. So Ed, thanks for joining tonight. Super excited to have you here. Uh, also late for you, man. So, but thanks for joining. So, dimensions collect related attributes that commonly occur together. So, great great explanation of what a dimension would really describe, and then and Ed goes into the exact thing that I was needing to go into next. So like street, city, state, zip of this particular address, which occurs repeatedly for a customer. So think about dimensions are attributes of a transaction. So a lot of times you'll see dimensions as a customer dimension, a product dimension, a store location dimension, or some type of location dimension. Um, so those are dimensions. Those are examples of dimensions. Uh, and Eric, also a fact is a unit of a business. So sales or transactions. Dimension is describes the properties or attributes of said event. So person, customer ID, item attributes. But this is a great explanation of facts and dimensions. So excited that you all are here tonight. Again, thank you for joining me. And again, several of you are part of our Discord. And for those of you that aren't, we have a Discord. It's getting more and more activity lately. So super excited about that. And thanks for joining. So part of normalization, absolutely. That's part of that conversation, right? And levels of normalization are also an important factor in data engineering, right? There's we hear a lot of third normal form, right? And that's a lot of times where we kind of land, but definitely part of normalization. So, yep. Thanks, Nikhil. Yeah, 12K soon. It's been a long journey. A little bit off topic there, but yeah, no, it's we will hit 12K soon. And for those of you that are new to the channel, we started about it'll be 2 years ago in June with one subscriber, and pretty sure that was my mother, right? So excited to be at almost 12,000 subscribers. Yeah, Ed just commenting here on 3NF, right? The third normal form is a lot of times kind of where we land. Okay, so we've talked about dimensions and facts. Now the second half of this question is, what are the types of slowly changing dimensions? And I often throw in, when would you use each one? So giving me an example of when you would use each of the different types of slowly changing dimensions. Again, this is one of those questions that I ask people that on paper have been doing this for 10 plus years, and they look at me like I have 5 heads. Like they don't, when I say SCD, they have no idea. And I don't fault people for not understanding the terminology, but you should at least understand those concepts. And if you're going to walk into an interview, try to be prepared for those types of questions. Right? Try to practice and research understanding some of the terminology and the words that you need to use. So let's jump into the slowly changing dimensions here. So tell me a little bit about slowly changing dimensions. I love Ed's answer right here. SCD 0, every possible combination that occurs. So SCD latest for yes. SCD 0 is kind of a chunk dimension, kind of also it is something that is static, right? It's something that gets loaded once and you don't ever touch it again. It's not even that you're truncating and reloading, like literally you put it in there and you never touch it again. SCD1, absolutely, right? Holds the latest version only of a set of attributes. So again, this is that truncate and reload. For those of you that don't know what truncate is, really the basis of that is that it is just clearing out the table. So it is clearing out the table and reloading it every time you're loading that data. There's no history there, only holds the latest version of that attribute. So it's just an overwrite every time. So please disregard, it seems data engineering questions. SCD type 1, again, you're right. Overwrite, no historical data tracking. SCD type 2, new row inserted with this is current column. And often you have your active date, retired date, or a start date and end date, right? And I mean, as an added bonus here, just added information, a lot of times those three columns that are added to those slowly changing dimensions are often preceded with a double underscore. And the double underscore just signifies that these are system type fields as opposed to something that's native in that table itself. Because so many tables that you ingest may already have like a start date and an end date, or even an active date and a retired date, depending on what that dimension is that you're looking at. An employee dimension could easily have a active date and retired date already as part of the data set. So anyways, if you see double underscore in something, then that probably indicates that it's a system generated or generated by the data engineer. SCD type 3. So SCD type 3, you're not going to see a ton out in the wild, right? You're not going to find a Pikachu popping up that's a SCD type 3. You're going to, but it is important to understand this concept because you will see it rarely from time to time. So again, I like this answer. New column. So address 1, address 2, partial history data tracking, right? Historical data tracking. So think of, I like the address example. It's one that I use often in my coaching, but think of a customer table that has the current address and the previous address. It only has current and previous address. There's no history there. Sometimes you'll see a type 5. There are variations, right? Sometimes you'll see a type 5, which is like a combination of 2 and 3. And so sometimes you'll see that where you'll have the history tracking, you'll have that start and end date with the is active flag, and you'll have current and previous value of a certain attribute. So, but great answer, Cartman. SCD type 2 is the favorite of probably almost every data engineer, definitely my favorite. That's the official definition. That's my favorite. I do love SCD type 2 and is often my go-to in my dimensions. And you often even see, not often, but sometimes you even see fact tables that are history tracking fact tables. And Ed, I think this was you and I may have had this conversation earlier too. But they are, there's actually a start and an end date and an is active date for the fact table as well, where you're tracking the history of all the transactions that are occurring. But SCD type 2 question, what is your preferred form of end date? Does it overlap the new record start date that follows, or do you subtract 1 day or minute or second so that you can use between? So I use the same, whatever is the start date of the next one is down to the grain, right, is the end date of the previous one. So if we're tracking by the second, then it's the exact same second. If we're just tracking by the day, then it's the same day. And then you use the less than greater than, right, without the equals. But I like to use that same date because there are some systems out there that needs that continuity, depending on what you're feeding that data to, because sometimes you're feeding that data back into another system. It needs that continuity, and otherwise it will see a gap if for some reason there's a time stamp in addition to the date that is looked at. So look, that same exact second or same exact day is beneficial. Great conversation tonight. Thank you all again so much for being on here. So great examples. Slowly changing dimensions, again, is something that really hangs a lot of people up. Again, even engineers that are applying for senior roles. So my next question is, What is a star schema and a snowflake schema, and tell me what the difference is. So this goes back in this all a lot of this goes back into modeling, um, and really heavily because I see such a gap uh, of both education and understanding when it comes to modeling for data engineers of all levels. Um, so star schema and snowflake schema, again, we go back to facts and dimensions. We go back to slowly changing dimensions even. Uh, we talk about grain, right? Talk about the level at which and the detail at which you have those dimensions. Um, so so important to understand star schema, snowflake schema. Uh, I asked somebody the other day if they understood, if they understood what Kimball methodology was, and again they looked at me like I had five heads. So it's so important to understand. Yes, so Ed has the perfect answer for the star schema, right? Star schema has only one layer of dimension tables off your fact table, right? Whereas Snowflake schema can have a little bit more granular uh, dimensions, right? So you might have your fact in the center, and then you'll have your dimension, and then you might have another dimension that relates to that dimension. So it kind of abstracts out. So yeah, and again, Ed, you're the star of the night. Snowflake can have multiple layers of dimensions, some dimensions of dimensions. And Eric, also the star of star of the night. Both of you are on fire tonight. Thank you. Star schema is I have a center fact table, and you have your dimensions table, dimension tables from that fact table. Snowflake schema is when I have dimensions extending out from those dimensions. So both of you, very similar wording, very similar, really same meaning of those answers. So great explanations. Again, thank you all. So next question is not a modeling question. The next question is, what Python library do you use generally when you're pulling an API, pulling data from an API? So let me know down in the comments what your answer is there, and we'll discuss it. There could be several different answers here, but there's one particular one that I'm looking for, right? Because there are some APIs out there that have very specific, great answer. I love it. Some APIs out there that have their own libraries, right? And by all means, for example, Jira / Atlassian, it has its own API library, Python library that you could use to pull that API. But the request library is what I'm looking for here. So this is what I'm looking for. I need to understand, especially since for data engineers, so much of your work is not just pulling data from something you have direct access to, right? You so often anymore, you don't have direct access to a backend database. Now, when you do, I'll ask the question here in a second about what library you might use to connect to a backend database or what methodology. But the request library is what you'd use for the API. Ed making a joke here, PySoap. So Eric, trade-off is performance denormalized versus oh yeah, going back to the Snowflake schema, requiring more joins for analytics due to its highly normalized structure. There was a time in the not too distant past where data engineers got like really obsessed with like hyper normalizing things, right? Really, really down to a incredibly granular level, and it to the point where it even became an issue in some cases. But yeah, Eric has a good explanation of kind of the trade-offs between performance and usability of Snowflake versus star schemas here. Definitely additional storage cost, right? When you have those Snowflake type dimensions. Request library for question 4. Absolutely. Yeah. So, no, I knew what you meant there, Eric. Star schema is absolutely optimal for analytics. So great answers for all that. So that was the Python library to pull for the API. Now, this is the fifth question. I know I had one in there that was kind of a multiple layer question, but this is the last question. And we'll go into probably additional questions that I ask as well, since I have time and we've got so many people jumping on here and being super interactive. So I appreciate it. But the last question is, why is Medallion Architecture, especially, what is Medallion Architecture, right? It's so important to know this and understand this, especially when it is called out in the job rec, right? If there's something in the job rec that says that we use basically that we use Medallion Architecture, make sure that you understand what those general layers are of Medallion Architecture and how it's implemented and why. So somebody tell me the three different layers that generally, right? There have more recently been more, but as a base, what are the three layers of the Medallion Architecture? Raw, cleansed, and curated, right? BSG. Eric, again, on top of it, right? So BSG stands for bronze, silver, and gold. So again, splitting of the ETL process into three stages: raw, cleansed, and curated. Let's see what Ed's got here. Designation of data stages of processing. Bronze, raw data. Silver is your where your some of your transformation logic, and then gold is where your aggregated data, transformed version of your data, or your aggregated, where you start adding in business logic, where you start adding in some additional complexity, right? Mutated into Parquet's dimensional for optimized analytics off of so Ed, I'll say that all Portvoice data warehouse called, yeah. So for those of you that don't know, I also write on Substack as well and have articles on Substack. And my most recent article was talking about Medallion Architecture and how it's not necessarily a new concept, right? And to some of your answers here, that gold layer is your aggregated, where your business logic often lies, where your more complex transformations occur. Sometimes these are materialized views, sometimes they're persisted tables. Just depends on what the business needs are there. But keeping in mind that, like for Unity catalog, really keeping in mind that all of your underlying data are actually Parquet files. So when you're using something like a Unity catalog or Iceberg, that data sits underneath that structure are actual files. And for Unity catalog in particular, Parquet files. So Eric, reason for doing this is because failure, increased cases of failure disaster. You have effective ways to recompute everything from raw data. So you have that traceability, auditability, in addition to the organization, right? Absolutely. Fantastic answer. Great job, Eric. So yeah, in addition to this, right, oftentimes you're just piling all of your raw data regardless into that bronze layer, right? You're not doing any transformations. You're not changing anything from the source. It is like for like, whatever came in, you're just dumping into your bronze layer. And so, so to that point, you might not take everything in your bronze layer and put it in your silver layer, right? There may be columns that are sparsely populated or that the business just doesn't need right now, that you're not going to that you're not actually going to spend time or compute cost doing the cleaning or doing the transformations to get it into your silver, and definitely not into your gold layers. But you always have that data if 6 months from now the business is like, hey, that column, we started using it, so we need it pulled through. So you always have that structure there. You always have that historical data there to pull back through when you do need it. And that happens. That happens frequently. Uh, going back to requirement gathering, sometimes the business gives you very specific sets of requirements with even very specific columns that they need, and sometimes they don't know what they don't know, right? And they find out 6 months later that, oh, I really need this field too. So when you have everything in bronze, when you're just piling everything in there, then you always have it to be able to pull through. Favorite file format? Great question. I'd love to hear everybody else's answer. I really like Parquet. I mean, JSON's great. Nobody loves Excel. No data engineer loves Excel. Every business user loves Excel. If anybody tells you Excel's going away, don't trust them. It's never going away. But I love Parquet. I love Parquet because of the structure and the how it really compresses, right? I mean, I've seen huge files compress into something tiny, so it does a great job of compression there. So gold layer is the base layer for BI developers, absolutely. Bronze layer is base for data engineers. That's a great explanation of those two layers. Gold layer is where all of your your modeled data is, right? Your modeled views are, so that you could hand that directly to a BI developer and they could take it, create the reporting, and there's not any or very little heavy lifting that the BI tool is doing, whether that be Excel or Power BI or Tableau or Looker, whatever the case may be. But I'm also a big advocate for migrating left anything that you're doing in Power BI or Tableau or those visualization tools, because those are visualization tools. Those are not ETL tools. So migrate that left into your data warehouse. Databricks architecture for Medallion bronze, ingestion notebook with merge upserts, Spark declarative pipeline for cleaning, incremental processing, and curated for your curated views. This is a great pattern here, right? It's not what everybody's using. It's not what happens every time out in the real world. But it's a great pattern, right? Your bronze ingestion is usually a notebook. Sometimes it is like Lakeflow Connect, right? I've seen a lot of companies use Lakeflow Connect to get data from a source directly into their bronze tables. I've seen some companies put that data directly into silver. I don't know that I'd recommend that, but and dumping all of that raw data into bronze. And then a lot of times they're using Spark declarative pipelines, aka DLT, right? So Delta Live tables used to be Delta Live tables, and then it was Lakeflow declarative pipelines. Now it's Spark declarative pipelines. If you hear any of those terms, they're all the same. But Spark declarative pipelines are the current version of the phrasing, but you could do your cleaning, your incremental processing with that. I really like to add a layer to this and use DQX, which is the Databricks Labs cleaning library, their data quality library, because then it gives you an easy path to quarantine your records in specific tables, so that you could use those quarantine tables to provide feedback back to the business, or quarantine problem records so that they could be reviewed and corrected and cleaned or whatever needs to happen there. But Eric, great pattern that gets used. How about I like Hootie, Iceberg, and Delta Lake are all fantastic formats, right? Again, Delta Lake under the hood are really a bunch of Parquet files. And so, but yeah, Delta Lake is obviously I'm in Databricks a lot. For those of you that have been around the channel a bit, yeah, let's say you have a raw table which has 5 columns: employee ID, age, salary, experience, address, and it has data. And now business has sent a newer version of format of data contains 6 columns. Happens all the time, right? We have a specific phrase for that, right? It's called schema drift. So say employee age, skills, new column, salary, experience, address. 100% happens all the time. There's something called Schema Evolution with Spark that you can implement. And there are definitely patterns around that. So what happens when a client says, I want a data lakehouse just because it's the most modern architecture, but in reality, they just need a data lake? How can we convince that it's not the problem right now? So this is a fantastic question. So thank you so much for asking it. And it relates to one of the quiz questions that we've had recently, right? You know, a lot of times some business person's going to hear, or some business itself, if you're a if you're a consultant, will hear, hey, there's this new tool, or there's this new methodology, or a data lakehouse, and they're like, it's shiny object syndrome, right? And it's the most modern architecture, or it's the coolest thing, or it's the hottest thing. That's this hype cycle, right? But they just need a data lake. Biggest thing here: talk about cost, talk about ROI, talk about, okay, yes, this is data lakehouse is this very robust system, but there's also cost that comes with it, and try to list out. A lot of times, if you talk out all the scenarios, talk out, actually, have discussions around what the business actually needs, and actually start listing out, do a whiteboarding session and start listing out all the pros and cons of what you're proposing and what they're proposing, and try to be very unbiased, right? And try to be very factual. But a lot of times when you list all that out, including if you can pull it and have an understanding of what current activity is, and so including some type of cost estimates, then when it comes down to it, dollars and cents are what is going to convince a business to make one decision or another. How can we handle a situation without creating new V2 version of the raw table? So in Unity Catalog, so when you're in Databricks, when you're in Unity Catalog, you can use Schema Evolution, and it will you just add the new column. It's just adding the new column, right? Because there's asset transactions, and you could add new columns, and generally you won't remove columns unless you're absolutely sure. But you wouldn't actually have like a V2 version of the raw table. The Schema Evolution just adds the new column in Unity Catalog, at least. So perhaps had date timestamp as part of the file name, then SCD to those to reflect what's true as of whatever date. I think the discussion there is probably around, what happens to the fact that historically that field's not going to be populated, and then all of a sudden it is, right? So there's timestamping is always important. I would definitely timestamp anyways. But yeah, let's see what Eric's been trade-offs for DQX versus expectations. DQX is more complex, absolutely. Define rules in YAML file. Great for quarantine table. Expectations, native implementation with the Databricks UI, easier to implement, and just natively part of DLT, right? So absolutely. New columns added, not revision of data. Yeah, new columns. Agreed. So what's this live all about? So the live sessions tonight is all about, we were talking about the 5 questions that I ask in every data engineering interview, regardless of level, right? I ask these questions of juniors to see really where they're at. Not that I'd expect them to be able to answer necessarily all of them. I ask it of mid-level. I do expect mid-level engineers to have a decent grasp of all these 5 questions. And then I 100% not only expect the seniors to have a grasp of all 5 of these, but also to be able to clearly explain to me the situations that they've run into where they've used these things before and give me very specific explanations of what's going on there. Can I tell you a silly question? I always love to. Yeah, absolutely. Bring it. Tell me what you got. While Ed's coming up here too, I'll say that we've talked about these 5 questions I always ask in data engineering interviews. I want to just reinforce the fact that you need to provide you need to also be prepared. Sorry, I'm laughing at Ed's question. You also need to be prepared to ask questions at the end of your interview, right? So important to have questions at the end of your interview to ask. And there's a handful of questions that I always ask, and I'll share those if you're interested. But let's get to Ed's question here. What is the result of this? The select statement. So select 3 less than null. Null provides all kinds of issues, especially in evaluation and where statements. So I want to hear from you all. What is your answer to Ed's question here? SQL syntax error. Null is an unknown value. Null is null. It's nothing. Literally nothing. Therefore, comparison is unknown. Okay. Exactly. Can you please let me know your opinion on Databricks versus Snowflake? No. Yeah, no. No. Yep. Okay, so compare no opinion on Databricks versus Snowflake. I mean, if you've been watching my videos, you know that I have a certain certain level of love for Databricks. It's where I live a lot of times. But I'll tell you that before I was ever in Databricks, I spent several years in Snowflake, and I went from from on-prem to Hadoop, which was still on-prem at the time, to really jumping into Snowflake. Spent a lot of time at on-prem and then jumping into Snowflake. But yeah, it's that I like Snowflake. I love Databricks. That's my opinion. But as far as like which one, I don't necessarily have an opinion on one being better than the other. I think that Databricks is doing a better job of integrating new add-ons and new features quicker. I think that Databricks is doing a better job when it comes, and has always done a better job on the machine learning AI side of the house. I think that Snowflake really, especially at the beginning, started out doing a tremendous job on the analytics side of the house. I've even seen many companies where they have both Databricks and Snowflake, where they're using Snowflake for their analytics and they're using Databricks for the machine learning and AI side of the business. So I see those types of scenarios. But looks like sets are there in math. Have you tried Snowflake? Cortex is great. And Genie is great. Like I don't, if you've not used the AI BI tool in Databricks, I would encourage you to go out and spin up a free edition and play with the AI BI tool, connect it to like the New York City taxi data set that's just already integrated in there, and just play with it. Um, and create a Genie space. You create Genie spaces and very much use it very similar to Cortex, where you're just using it for NLP. NLP is the natural language processing, but Cortex does a great job too. I have a couple of my coaching students are in Snowflake with their jobs, and they love Snowflake, and there's not a problem with that. I used to wonder exactly this, and I see them as fundamentally different tools. They are, to Ed's point here, Databricks and Snowflake have very different use cases, especially early on, right? Especially if you were to look at them 3 years ago, 5 years ago, Databricks and Snowflake. Again, Databricks often lean towards that machine learning, data science side of the house, and where Snowflake leaned more towards the analytics side of the house, and that was their target market. Each of them originated in different spots and have over time kind of converged, and which is why there's such a rivalry now. I mean, even to the point where they've purchased similar companies, right? That the Databricks Neon purchase, and then Snowflake went out and purchased a very like Postgres company as well. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I remember that they both, within a month or so of each other, both purchased a Postgres company, but moved closer to each other over time. Snowflake now seems like a managed data warehouse. Yeah. Absolutely. I could see that. Databricks is Spark, and then they evolved every other thing in the Dataverse around it. And Ed, even now in Snowflake, you create notebooks and use Spark within Databricks. Within Snowflake, obviously within Databricks. All the Apache stuff is there, but you could use Spark within Snowflake as well in notebooks. Agreed, we can forget love, but also need to have exposure towards new AI ML features, which is why I love Databricks, right? Databricks has done a phenomenal job, in my honest opinion, of integrating all the different AI things that are going on, right? You have MCP server, you have again, the Genie does a fantastic job, the agent does a fantastic job, especially more recently since it's been rebranded recently as the Genie agent. The AI BI tool is fantastic. You can build a Streamlit app that integrates with OpenAI or Claude, or one of the Anthropic models, right? Even some of the Gemini models, and so you can integrate all of that inside of Databricks, which is fantastic. And to that point, the new Gambill coaching tool that I'm creating, that creates projects for you, is all hosted within Databricks, and I created all of that inside of Databricks. So it really is a phenomenal tool. And for those of you that may be out there that are part of the beta version 1, thank you very much for volunteering to be part of the beta version, and also for providing feedback. You'll help definitely make a fantastic tool for everybody. Catalog ingestion, Lakehouse, everything seems more completely thought out and integrated in Databricks, right? It does. We cannot forget love, right? Again, I love Databricks. It just is. Not for any other reason than I went from on-prem to Snowflake to Databricks, and I was like, ooh, Databricks. So there's that. Snowflake in Mexico is like the failed promise that everyone wants to get out of it. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. That's good to know. Don't know if it's because there are not a lot of Snowflake talent here. Maybe. Um, I have, I work with a couple of guys from uh, Central America, and I'm confident that they'd be able to jump into anything. But they, yeah, they're, it, I'm confident that my friends Miguel and Guido would be able to jump into it. But just want to say thank you. I enjoy learning a lot from you. Absolutely, you're welcome. Thank you so much for saying that and for being on tonight. I love when new people are on. And again, for those of you that are new to the channel that are just finding me tonight, we have a Discord. Again, getting more and more active. I do host some cohort type projects there where I'll create a project, throw it out there for people to work, and I'll try to provide encouragement throughout. But the Discord link is on the main channel there. So be sure to check it out if you're interested. What technical skills do I need to know if I just know a bit of SQL and Power BI to become a data engineer, a junior one? I'm actually a data analyst who would like to become a data engineer. So great question. And I'll say that great campfire together around. To answer the question, I'm gonna make a comment first, and that is that junior engineer roles are few and far between. It's not because of AI. People will convince you that it is. This has always been true. And if you think about it logically, you'll understand why, right? As a data engineer, you have great power and great responsibility, to take a phrase from Aladdin. So great power, itty bitty living space. But you have great power and great responsibility, and it's hard for a business, especially a business that really is very mature with their data organization and very reliant on their data tools, to trust somebody that's brand new to data to give them they're giving you access literally to drop a table and delete records. So junior positions have always been few and far between. When you do find them, there's a blue million people applying to them. That being said, you're already a data analyst, which you should be working towards doing some data engineering activities in and of the role that you're already in, if you can. Having those conversations with your engineers and talking to them, understanding what they're doing and how everything is interacting with everything else, and what you could do to help them. Because sometimes if you have space within your current job to maybe be able to take on some of their tech debt tickets, oftentimes data engineering teams will allow a data analyst to help with some of that work. I worked with a company called Cellular Sales, and we definitely had analysts there that they really wanted to become data engineers at some point, and they helped with some of the tech debt from time to time. The ones that were more advanced. So you're already a data analyst. The big things to know, right? If all you know now is a bit of SQL and Power BI, start learning some Python. Or if you already know Java, then that's a path. Java is definitely degrees of complexity more difficult than Python, but start jumping into Python. Understand distributed compute. Understand how to create Python scripts to, like we talked about earlier, ingest data from APIs. Understand what JDBC is, and ADBC is the Apache version, right? Is the newer Arrow version of the there's ODBC, JDBC, now ADBC. So basically, they're the connectors to databases, right? So that you can pull data directly from the databases. Um, Understanding those concepts, understanding what the difference in creating efficiencies around your queries for columnar databases versus row databases, right? Our traditional kind of legacy SQL servers, Oracle databases were row based, right? And how you make things more efficient in a modern database that is columnar um, is different than how we did that back in the day with on-premise, the like I said, the legacy, the OG databases. So understanding again those things. Those are the big things. Those are where I would start. Pick a tool, whether it's Snowflake or Databricks. Pick a tool, stick with it. Start, really diving deep into it. I like Databricks right now because they do have the free edition. Again, love Databricks. But one of the reasons why I use it with a lot of my coaching students that they're targeting data engineering and fields where Databricks is a little bit more prominent is because they have the free edition. You could spin it up. You don't have to worry about a bill. You can practice, all kinds of different Python methods. You could practice using Lakeflow Connect. You could practice declarative pipelines. You can practice, creating your Medallion architecture. All those things you could practice within Databricks without worrying about having a bill at the end of the month. With Snowflake, they have like a free trial period. So that's definitely an option if you want to jump into Snowflake. With Azure, Fabric, also Azure has you get like $200 or $300 and 90 days to use that, $200 or $300 worth of credit. Keeping in mind that if you do something like that, make sure that you pause your Fabric resource at the end of the day when you're done using it, or Fabric's one of those resources that you easily could be surprised at the end of the month with a $2,000-$3,000 bill for a individual person that has an account. So be careful with that. Which one costs more, Databricks or Snowflake? It depends on how you're using it, right? I mean, both can be incredibly expensive and incredibly complicated depending on how you're using it and what you're doing with them. Honestly, it has more to do with creating efficient scripts and using writing efficient queries than it has to do with one being more expensive than the other. That's my answer for that. Do you really believe that AI can take out data? No, I don't. I absolutely don't. And I'll tell you why. So this is my spiel about AI. One, if you're not already using an AI tool now, you're behind, right? Those are the people that it's going to take out, right? You hear the cliche of AI is not going to take your job. Somebody using AI is going to take your job. And I hate that cliche. However, throughout my 26 years in this career, I started, with DTS packages and crystal reports, moved into, the SQL Server stack, right? The SSIS, ASRS, SSMS is just the management tool, right? It's just the UI. But from that, we moved into, Hadoop, the big yellow elephant. And from there, we moved into cloud, into Azure and AWS, and eventually GCP. And then from there, we moved into Snowflake and Databricks. And every few years, there's an evolution in data engineering. I say evolution in your data profession. 26 years ago, when I first started this, there was no such title as a data engineer. We were just the data person. And as the data person, we did all the things. And that pendulum is starting to swing back a little bit to, again, if you follow me on other platforms, you'll have heard me say this generalist with a niche. So it's the pendulum starting to swing back to where you need to have a little bit broader knowledge of being able to pivot and jump into some analytics, or be able to pivot and jump into even some networking type stuff, depending on what's going on. So you need to be able to adjust and pivot and kind of do more broad spectrum things. But also have a specific skill set that you're like, this is my differentiator. And that's good in any career, to have something that is your differentiator. But that being said, you have to evolve and understand how to use the tools available. I'm sure that there were accountants, forever many years ago, that when the calculators became prevalent, that they were so mad at these young people coming in with their calculators, and the accountants still sitting there with their abacus on the desk, right? So it is evolution and evolving and adapting and learning, and that continuous learning has always been part of data engineering and will always continue to be part of data engineering. And no, AI is not going to take out data engineering jobs, because AI needs us to continue to do our jobs in order for them to continue to learn and grow. Love Discord, great campfire to gather around. Again, I do like, we do have the Discord channel for those of you that are interested. So correct, free trial expired after time, but Databricks is offering that, the free edition, which never expires, again, which is a fantastic tool. So definitely use it for what it is. You could practice learning Python. You could practice advanced SQL techniques. You could practice and see, and judge on your own visually in front of you different methods to use with Python and SQL, and see what the efficiency differences are between them. You could even, there is a repo out there where you can download a report that will effectively tell you approximately what your free edition would cost in a actual environment. So let me pull that up and I'll show you. But it is it's pretty cool, and a useful tool if you're interested in being able to see what your free edition might cost on a real platform. Trying to find it here. Oh, I just sent it to. So for those of you that don't know, I do full day Databricks workshops for businesses. So if that is something that anybody is interested in, be sure to email me on the side. But one of those I just did in DataTune a few weeks back. Did a full day Databricks workshop. Really had a fantastic time with it. We had a small class, and everybody seemed to really take a lot away from it. We got to really discuss a lot of very specific use cases. And one of the things that I showed during that was this particular report. So workshop. So what other questions do you all have while I'm pulling this up? And here it is. So this is the link that I'm talking about. So that link will take you to the Lakeflow system tables dashboard. And basically that dashboard looks like, let's see if I could share here. Share screen, window, dashboards. So this Lakeflow system tables dashboard, it takes a few minutes to spin up, depending on where you're at. So again, my warehouse is starting, so it'll take a minute. But this is Ed. Thanks for being here. So again, this will spin up here in a second and show us the approximate cost so far of where I'm at for the last 60 days. So it takes a minute, especially if your cluster is not always already running. While we're waiting on that, I'll also show all of you that are here the new coaching project creator. Okay, so this is the new tool that people are beta testing right now. I hope to launch it by the end of the month. But people have really done a great job of testing this and getting some tools out of it. Newer thing that I implemented today is this My Projects tab, which will show you all the projects that you've created within the tool. You could view the project, gives you, candidate summary, your strengths, your growth areas, recommended project, skills to build on, the stack, the deliverables, and then the actual implementation steps, right? And there's some other information in here, but basically you upload your resume, upload your resume, and then you upload your self-assessment, and there's a link here to open a self-assessment doc, and it's just a Word doc that you basically fill out and then re-upload here. And so you hit the choose file, and then you'll, the file selector comes up, and you'll choose your assessment file. If you have any additional, text that you want to put in here, so it says describe strengths, gaps, and the kind of role that the student wants, and then put some target job links in here. So you'll put your target job links. I recommend at least 3, and then select your industry. Say gambling. I don't know. You do whatever. Let's do. I don't know. Somebody tell me what industry might you want to look at, and I'll dump it in here. Trying to think off the top of my head. I've used a few several times, trying to think of something different. Logistics. And then I just have some information on privacy, data collection, and retention, just some legal stuff. But then, aviation would have been great. Airline would have been great. So you hit the button, generate the project. It does take like 30, 60 seconds. So while we're waiting on that, let's flip over and see usage. Start date. Let's just say today. But you'll see that this kind of gives you some number of runs, distributions, some cluster analysis as to what's going on here. Man, it's running slow tonight. Where it says no data, it usually has a cost analysis. I have one that I created. It's a little bit quicker, I think. This one I created. I'd be happy to share it if anybody's interested. But okay, so coaching app, it does take like 30, 60 seconds, especially since I added this last thing about making sure that it doesn't have any duplicates. So there, project came up. last mile delivery, network efficiency, and EV transition analysis platform. You could export as PDF, export as Word, download the Markdown. If you expand this, you'll see what the Markdown looks like. But again, gives you what the target roles are, and that's going to be based on those target job links that you upload into that box. It gives you a candidate summary. Again, this is going to be based on your resume and your self-assessment that you load. Again, it's going to give you your strengths and your growth areas, again, based on that information that you load in here. It's going to give you your recommended project and down to what the business problem is, why this project was created specifically for you, the portfolio story. So it's going to give you kind of a fictional story around what your project's going to be about, the skills that you're going to build with this project, tools and deliverables. So, your tools and your stack. So your tools and your deliverables here, and then your implementation steps, right? All your step-by-step, this is what you need to do to successfully perform all the steps in this project. At the end of this, I've also added in some interview talking points. So these are things that you're going to want to think about as you're going through and doing your project. So why you intentionally chose this project instead of another operational reporting pipeline. And you did this to show that you could build data products for investment decisions. What the hardest part of the project was, I used geospatial enrichment to connect charging infrastructure and climate conditions, right? Again, some interview talking points about your project is what this is actually giving you. So key things to keep in mind as you're going through the project, that these are some of the things that you would talk about when you're sharing this project with a potential hiring manager. And then at the end, it has all the links to the actual data sets and any supplemental resources that you may need to do the project. Again, this is something that I'm beta testing now. I have about 10 people, a little more than 10 people going through the beta test now. Hope to launch it at the end of the month. Again, it's got how it works, privacy and data. You could go back and see any previous projects that you created. And again, all of it, you export to Word, export to PDF. It's going to download the file. You open the file, and we'll move it over here and share that window. Boom, boom, boom. I think it's this one. Nope. Mm-hmm. 462. Yeah, there it is. So again, this is what it looks like when you export it to Word. Very similar to, it has all your links and everything, and you'd export to Word, and then you'll have your project. And let's see if there it is. So this is the dashboard, cost dashboard that I created. Share screen. And you could kind of see, this is set up to be by week. So the week of March 16th, this is what cost would look like. Again, this is the one that this is the workspace that I'm hosting my Databricks, the app on. So it's a little bit more, just because there's been more activity here. But it shows interactive, default storage, apps, jobs, networking, predictive optimization, and SQL. And basically you could take this, put it into your free edition as well, and see how your costs would look in a actual environment. So those are the things I wanted to cover tonight. again, thank you all for being on here tonight. We had some great discussions. For those of you that jumped on late, it'll be on the YouTube channel. It usually takes a day or so before the higher resolution version is out there, but be sure to go back and take a look, and be sure that you'll understand how to answer those 5 questions that I specifically always ask in my interviews. So again, thank you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate everybody jumping on a Tuesday night, whatever day it is. And I will see you all again soon.